And we are back with Christian Finnegan. I had a bad 9/11 this year, I feel. Like it just, I thought about it too much. I paid attention. I let conspiracy theorists
Your balloons didn't show up in time.
Yeah. I
get it.
We had a cake that we were making. It was a bad 9/11 this year.
One of my best friends, although we're not really in contact now, and also one of my favorite comics, this guy John Corbett, who I was in a sketch group with in the late 90s, not the star of Sex and the City, by the way, different John Corbett, but he used to have this bit about how, like, on 9/11, like, pretty soon it's going to be like promotions, like, you know, bar promotions, like, come on down to Ground Bureau, you know, and what's the 911 weekend, you know, and it just, every time I think about what you just said, made me think.
This week there was a tiny little scandal where one of the betting, the gambling sports sites.
Oh yeah, the New York Parlay. Yeah,
had to apologize because they were special bets on the New York teams, the Bills, the Jets, and the Giants. And then the next day, the New York Giants Facebook page tweeted out, "New York Giants, never forget," with, you know, the skyline, and someone wrote around it, to play defense because they lost like 42-0.
Oh, people are funny, aren't they? I do feel like we have turned a corner with 9/11 in this point where I think we're all okay with people making jokes about it now. You know what I mean? I'm
seeing more of it. Shane Gillis's new special has a really brutal joke about.
But I'm not even talking about like brutal jokes. I'm saying it's entered the realm of like acceptable comedy fodder.
Yeah, I think so. Not to the victims' families, but yeah.
No, of course, I don't think anybody would ever make fun of the victims. It's entered this sort of meme realm that, like, the way you can joke about Abraham Lincoln's assassination. Like, at one point, that was a tragedy, and you couldn't joke about that. And then at another point, it was kind of edgy to joke about it, I'm sure. And then at a certain point, everybody's like, all right, we can joke about Lincoln's assassination now. I feel like 9/11 has crossed that threshold.
Yeah, I mean, they're not perfectly analogous.
I mean, it's never not going to be the worst thing that's happened in my life. I mean, on a global scale, like it's certainly the biggest tragedy that I have ever been even remotely close to. I mean, just in terms of proximity and whatnot. And so nothing will ever diminish that. And that's what I think maybe people who don't live in New York don't understand. I think people in New York were actually quicker to joke about it than people in other parts of the country.
Yeah, and I got accused on Facebook of my community of not caring about 9/11 victims because I was okay with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind, getting a life sentence and not the death penalty. He then jumped from there. You don't care about the victims. And I was like, you know, actually, I don't know if you know anybody who died, but I knew people who died. And there's a guy I went to the gym with like every day. We weren't good friends, but I saw him every day for like 5 years. And then he was dead the next day. And friend's dad died. And then it was horrible for months after that. I was a comic. I was actually the first year I was making really good money in New York City. I got like this great regular gig at, remember that comedy club that was part strip club? And it was just about to take off. And thank you, Rudy Giuliani. And all those gigs were like, I was so negatively affected by it that I do feel like I can, you know, have some levity around it. But it doesn't
mean... You're the real victim of 9/11? Is that what you're trying to say, Pete?
I'm the real.
These phonies, all this stolen valor.
I don't know. I don't know why there's my name should be engraved somewhere, even though I'm living. In terms of people who were affected but are still living.
What do they call it? The contemplation pool or whatever? What is it called?
The footprints of 9/11. Yeah.
Or something. That's your bathtub. You just sit over it and you reflect.
Have you ever gone to the 9/11?
Sorry.
Have you ever gone to the 9/11 museum? I covered it when it opened. The day it opened for Sirius XM, I went all throughout and got a private tour, and it was. I never want to go back there ever. It was.
Yeah, I have not. My wife did recently she had a relative in town, and so they went. But, you know, it had entered the realm of like, all right, we'll hit up Times Square and then we'll go to Rockefeller Plaza and then we'll see the 9/11 museum. Sure. You know, it's a thing you do when someone's in town. But yeah, I'm not saying that I can't go. I certainly could go and it would be fine. I don't feel that my appreciation for the tragedy of 9/11 will be enhanced one way or the other by going.
Well,
you
no,
know what I mean? I don't feel like I'm going to go and be like, now I get it. Like, no, I get it.
I think museums like that one in the Holocaust Museum and a museum to slavery or any genocide are super important. Yeah. Especially for people who didn't live through them or at their time. Having lived through 9/11, I'm good. Like, they'd be like a Holocaust survivor had to go to see the Holocaust Museum. I'm sure they don't need to. It's there. But
also the Holocaust encompasses a lot more than 9/11 does. I mean, that sounds weird to say. I mean, just in terms of chronology, I mean, the Holocaust is a number of years. There were things that led up to it, and there were things that happened after the tail end of World War II. Sure. I mean, the Holocaust is like a generational story. Whereas 9/11 is the story of an incident, really. I mean, sure, there's history that led up to it, but in terms of what that museum is trying to capture, it's trying to capture that day and the lives of the people that were touched by it. It's not quite the same. In addition to what you were saying, is that we lived through it.
I think it was a lot more this. Yes, I appreciate the delineation, the hair splitting. I think it's more the same than 9/11 and Lincoln's assassination, which was your comparison from earlier.
Yeah, I mean, the Holocaust is the exception that the Holocaust is the exception that proves the rule. I mean, the Holocaust is the one thing that will never fully, knock on wood, God forbid, enter the meme realm. Do you know what I mean?
You should go on the Facebook page of my community.
No, I'm saying, see, those are the kind of jokes everybody makes. We all have made Holocaust jokes or used the Holocaust as like an example, like a unintentionally bad punchline.
Right, right.
You know, it's a comedy device, right, certainly.
For sure.
But I don't think anyone necessarily wants to just make light jokes about the Holocaust itself. Do you know what I mean? You're making a joke about talking about the Holocaust. That's really the joke that you're
I think what I mean is like the people who are denying it. And they're not really making jokes, I guess, though. So we're not.
No.
We've lost the conversation of being. Can you be lighthearted about a thing? But all good and well. So 9/11 anniversary.
We really hit all the bases here. Which
this is good. This is good. But then I did want to ask you about something lighter before we go back into the serious, which is this time
lighter than the Holocaust.
Yeah. Yes.
See?
Yes.
I did it.
Wait. So it's super lighter because I wanted to ask you. It's the end of mid to end September. Is apple picking time?
Ladies and gentlemen, the best transition of all time. Enough about the Holocaust. Apple picking.
It's also Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova, everybody, and apple picking. So I think you have a place upstate, and I think, should we just wrap up the interview? There's nowhere to go,
Probably.
Right?
I mean, we're in a very deep hole at this point, and I don't really see us climbing out of this anytime.
How about I just play some music, and then we get out of it?
It's
okay. We're back.
I was worried it was going to be some like German folk song or something, you know.
Oh God. I'm not that quick or clever, and you know better. Do you have thoughts, experiences, and an idea? Apple picking has gotten expensive, but it is a great thing to do with the family or on a date. I've done it both ways, and even as a child, I used to love everything around apple picking. It's a lot of happiness, and I feel like you've got something to say here.
I mean, I am from Massachusetts, which is the ceremonial home of both apple picking and people who look like they're apple pickers. But I certainly have picked me an apple or two over the years, but not since I was probably 12 years old.
Oh, no.
It was something that you did as a kid, like relatively often, but it's not something I've done in my adulthood. And I now look back on it, and it's a hack joke to make, but like, what do you do there? You're just picking apples, and a lot of times you're just picking them up off the ground, because that's really where most of the apples are.
I don't think you should do that. I think those are the ones that go to the cidery. But I have so many great childhood memories around it, and I probably have gone almost every year. I certainly visit in Orchard, except when I lived in New York every year.
It's very appealing to me. And honestly, talking about it now makes me want to go.
There you go.
And we have this house upstate, and I bet there's probably a place I could go apple picking up there. It has just genuinely never occurred to me to do that.
We should get a blanket, you and me, and, some drinks and some cheese and whatever. And we'll
you wear
sit
that skirt I like.
under. Yeah, I will wear that or whatever. And we'll sit under an apple tree and we'll podcast. The sun.
That really just ruined the entire, it's a beautiful apple tree, sunset, picnic, and we're podcasting.
How do you feel about...
Do you notice when you fart that... No, sorry.
Did you pay any attention to...
My imitation of podcasting.
Feel about... Did you pay any attention to, and how do you feel about the prison escape in Pennsylvania?
Pro. No,
You're pro. I root for the guys to escape. It is funny because it makes you confront the thing inside yourself that wants to root for the anti-hero, because we've seen so many movies. There is an instinctive yeah, man, get out. Get out, run.
Go do it. And then you're like, and he murdered 4 people in cold blood and he could be coming to your house next. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, right. I didn't really think this fully through. There are people, there's the Innocence Project. There are people wrongfully convicted. We live in a incarceration state and a carceral. Is that the proper word?
Incarceral state.
A carceral state. These are all true things. But, let's not forget, there are also murderers.
It's an important framing of it, and it's exactly how people react to it. Last night at our hangout, listener friend Ty goes, he's so stupid, he got arrested because he stupidly stole a car, and I just want to make fun of Ty again. What was he supposed to do? Apply for a loan, Ty? He's like, that's how he got caught. Dumbass stole a car. I was like, he had to steal shoes. I mean, everything he had to get. He wasn't applying. He wasn't swiping.
I brought in a note from my employer and a credit score.
Apple Pay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did pay attention.
I did think it was. I don't know the story behind it, and so, but I'm sure you saw the photo that
the video of him crab walking up the building.
Oh no! When they caught him yesterday, there was a big photo of 40 cops in fatigues, taking a photo with him. Which I get it. This has been a big thing. People were scared. You caught him before he killed somebody else. These are important, but I don't know. It brought back memories of Abu Ghraib to me, ever so slightly.
Bad. Terrible look.
Yeah,
terrible look to be dressed. First of all, you're just promoting and publicizing that your police is basically like a paramilitary force. Yeah. And secondarily, you're all smiling. And I don't know if you noticed this. He was all. But
go ahead.
He's wearing a Philadelphia Eagles sweatshirt.
You think they would be like, all right, go ahead, buddy. All right. Would that be Steelers country? I don't know.
I think he was in outside Philly. I forget where.
But shoot, I don't remember what we were going to say. Oh, well.
Thoughts on the news that this week Drew Barrymore and Bill Maher are taking their shows back to work. They're breaking they're crossing the line, the union, the Writers Guild line. They have Writers Guild writers on those shows, obviously. And they both going back to work. They're both very different people and probably will get different reactions. But who's going to go on those shows as guests? That's what I wonder. That doesn't seem like a very pragmatic approach. Of course, Bill Maher will probably get Justin Jordan Peterson and Barry Weiss and Meg.
Increasingly, it's on brand for him. It feels very much like an evolution of his change, shall we call it, over the past 2 to 4 years. Yeah. With Bill Maher, it's of course, you're not no surprise. That dude is to me like an ultimate pull the ladder up kind of guy. You weren't once a struggling you think because talk about a guy who was in the right place at the right time, who just happened to be doing comedy in the 80s in LA as the comedy boom happened. Or I don't know if it was LA or New York they started, but it was New
York, I think.
Talk about a guy, a value over replacement player score of 0. Have you ever heard that term, value over replacement player? It's a basketball term, and it basically means how does this guy rate to an average, if we took a league average person. So if you're VORP, that's the term. If your VORP is high, that means you are much more valuable than the average person at your position would be. And Bill Maher has a VORP of 0. That dude, That dude is just a guy doing comedy. If he wasn't there in the 80s, if he came up when we were coming up, he's just a dude doing comedy. And we know 100 of those.
He takes a lot of risks and he pisses off people. Bill Maher. I
mean, that's really his. And I used to really enjoy Real Time. Like I really enjoyed that show because I think it's a great format. I still think it's a really well formatted show with the interview up front. And then they have like a desk, then they have the panel and the desk piece. New Rules is a great segment, but the comedy is bad. It's always been bad. It's terrible. I mean, I think he still calls Kim Jong-il Lil Kim and chuckles at himself every time he does it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still.
And then he'll say, like, my next guest is an astrophysicist at University of California. My old job.
Yep. I do that a lot. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done it maybe a few times.
My old job?
I've done my old job a few times. I'm not gonna lie.
Don't do my old job.
Yeah. So, and Drew Barrymore, do you have a different lens looking at her? She's America's sweetheart.
Drew Barrymore, that is just, what are you doing? Like you're an actress. Like, you don't remember, and I'm sure they got people in their ear there are staff members and who are legitimately suffering, who are not part of the strike, who are crew people. They work in the second, third tiers of the entertainment business. It's got to be really painful for them. But what's the risk reward here? It's like, all right, great. Your show's back up and you've lost any goodwill you've had. People won't forget. Writers and actors will not forget. I think stars will eventually go back on just because they need to promote their crap, but it'll never be the same. And talking about a person with sort of an impeccable public persona. Do you know what I mean? Like everybody loves Drew Barrymore. Yeah. Everybody.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Like, why are we doing? And then, to be fair, I haven't read if she's put out a statement why she was doing this, but I saw Bill Maher's. And he's like, not everybody, that works on the show is a writer. There's other people. And, I work at HBO. I get paid, every couple weeks. At last week tonight, I could use that money, but I'm, like, what do we?
But at the end of the day, it's you don't get to decide. Your bringing your show back doesn't end the strike.
Right.
All it does is bring your show back. All you're doing is watering down what the leverage that the unions have. And so it's like, just don't ever. It's easy to be a union guy when everybody's happy. It's when shit comes to a head.
Yeah, that's when
you are a union person. And I'm calling myself out here because I have not been out striking. Part of it is out of sort of embarrassment. I'm a lapsed member of both SAG and WGA. I'm not currently a member. And so part of me feels like, well, I don't want to go strike because I'm not even a member. I feel like a poser or whatever. And my feeling is I'll probably start going in now. I'll be like one of those fresh faced recruits you see in like World War II movies.
Like giving blood, never too late. And what do you say? What is that? Why would you use that analogy? Are you going to get shot right away?
No, but you know what I'm talking about? How there's always the scene towards the end of the war movie where the grizzled vets are walking back and then they pass the fresh-eyed I'm gung-ho for war. Yes. I'll be that guy.
Well, bodies on the line is what they need, says the guy that hasn't also walked the line. And I am an active AFTRA member, I believe, so... Well, I know. Anyway, so that's terrible and sad. And now you got the UAW going on strike. That'll be a really interesting thing. It seems like everybody, even Trump, was like, I support these guys. I think it's great. And so I wonder how long that's going to last. That's a whole different...
It's a really interesting test case because, I think one of the ways Trump kind of dug into a lot of quote unquote traditionally Democratic areas, same way that Reagan did, is that they may economically, their interests may be aligned with Democrats. Their sort of persona, the person they'd rather have the beer with is the Republican. Do you know what I mean? That's like, culture wise, they're more aligned with Trump.
I can do it. I can do this one just a little bit better by telling you 2 points of evidence. My father-in-law, who's UAW and super racist, and when I was at CNN's John King basically told me to my face after we walked off the air, I should have asked him on the air, why are there so many UAW members? This was like 2010, I guess, that are against Barack Obama. And John King just looked at me without pausing. He goes, because he's black. So it's like a lot of those guys are racist. Yeah. And father-in-law.
Of course, then they go on and they both sides it on the air.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
that's what's the most frustrating and annoying thing about the media. And I hate using that rough, when people complain about the media, it's just like, they know the real truth. They know the answer. And obviously objectivity and all that, but it's just like, what's going on here, but then you get on TV and you act like nobody can know what's going on here. For some reason, all these UAW members don't like Barack Obama. Who can say why? It's like, off camera, you know why, and you'll say why.
Yeah. So that's I think a big thing about those folks and that industry right now. It's the heart of, But
it'll be an interesting test case to see, because I think, first of all, that is not true to the extent that Trump believes it's true. I think that the economic interests aligning with Democrats is more important to a lot of UAW workers than any sort of cultural affinity they feel for Trump.
So it certainly is for the vast majority of organized labor, but the UAW is just, as we're talking about, a bit of a different culture.
And also, UAW is a lot less white than it was 20, 30 years ago.
I would imagine so. And then, and they see the South where they have automobile manufacturing plants that aren't members of the UAW. They see.
You're talking to a former UAW member here, I should mention.
You were a member of the United...
I was a member of the United Auto Workers.
What are you talking about right now?
It's the dumbest thing in the world. I used to work at Barnard College in the facilities department, like when students would have their radiator that needed to be fixed, or there was a dead roach in the room, and the maintenance and cleaning and stuff like that. I was the dude at the phones answering, and we were unionized under UAW. A lot of tiny little pockets of like also the security guards at the Met at the museum were also members of the UAW.
Yeah, they'd love to have you for sure.
Yeah. So I know what I'm talking about is what I'm trying to say.
You really made me think that you built a car at some point.
I can't build
Legos. A lot of stolen valor. I've never seen so much from you, but I guess it's legitimate.
I'll take credit.
Well, this week, the last thing I want to ask you about is one political big story that drove the week in politics is that this week Republicans announced they were going to start the impeachment of President Joe Biden. And the main reason, apparently, his main impeachable offense, from what I've gathered, is beating Donald Trump. So
I like how you really pulled that out lengthwise there. Is beating Donald Trump. I liked it.
It's a comedian. McDonald you.
Yeah, kind of. Well,
here we go. Impeachment time.
Here we go. I think that it could help Trump and hurt the rest of Republicans.
Oh, that's an interesting take I have yet to hear. Okay, go ahead.
That I think that it could win votes that it could help Trump in the sense that more mud on Biden is helpful to Trump, and anything to make people think, oh, they're all corrupt, so fuck it. Either I'm going to vote for, or I'm just not going to vote. I'm not going to take all these people talking about how, fascism is coming. They're all liars. I don't care. I'm not going to bother voting, which is helpful to Trump. But in like House districts where it's not giant states where, in smaller districts where it's a smaller pool of people, it could really be hurtful to the quote unquote mainstream Republican.
Maybe in my district where we still
exactly your district being a perfect example.
Mike Lawler is for impeachment, and that's
shocking to me. I'm surprised he's playing it for
impeachment. Like a bad hand for him, I think, but
it's a bad hand for him because that was his whole message, is that I'm going to get past all this nonsense.
They're riding real high on the migrant invasion narrative, and they got a lot of political capital on that.
Yeah,
and
that may offset it.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm worried about that. Yeah,
but I don't think that the impeachment is helpful to people like that, to guys like that. And so you only need a few of those to flip the House.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting take on it. Could help Trump and hurt Biden. Now, does Hunter Biden's indictment, are you outraged that Joe Biden is using his Justice Department to go after his political enemies and his own son? I thought he loved his son.
You have to respect the cognitive dissonance that your average Republican representative can live with in their head.
Yeah.
And I know I've talked about this before about how Trump was he had no gag reflex. And that's why I think people loved him so much, is that most people, when they're lying, just flat out lying or full of shit or just wrong, there's something inside you that makes you start stammering or you start sweating.
Yeah.
You have these bodily functions that reveal that that you're full of shit.
It's called Jim Jordaning.
Huh?
It's called Jim Jordaning.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has one to a degree.
Yeah.
Except Trump. Trump does not have one. And it is something that the rest of them are learning. You can see it happening in real time. You can see the sort of the James Comers of the world, all these guys who can literally say, oh, the Trump Biden is weaponizing the Department of Justice. Oh, and clearly Hunter Biden needs to go to jail or else he wouldn't have been indicted. They can hold those two thoughts in their head at the same time and not feel any embarrassment about it.
Yeah, that's for damn sure. We see it on display every day. That James Comer is real bad at this. He's real bad. Usually they're pretty good at selling their whatever Benghazi, that whatever me. I remember.
Well, that's always, they always had that mix of the sort of the flamethrowers, the Virginia Foxes, and what was that? The Louis Gohmert.
Oh yeah,
they had the idiot fire breathers who would go out and sort of create all the heat.
Yeah.
But then they also had sort of shrewd tacticians who knew how to move the ball.
But they mostly the brain drain of the Republican caucus in the House.
Yeah, exactly.
They're down to hayseeds and John Kennedy reading those graphic passages from books. Did you see that this week?
I did. Well, he honestly, it's like that dude. I think he's either a Harvard grad or an Oxford. He's an Oxford grad, I believe.
He's doing a whole character he's like Borat.
But I don't think anybody can say for certain how it's going to play out. But you see it as a sign of weakness to me, as not a sign of strength. Is that McCarthy's been kind of trapped into it. All the deals he had to make to even become speaker in the first place. You see him sort of just, let me get through this cycle. Let me do what I need to do to get through today. And let me see what I need to do to get through tomorrow.
Yeah.
And now here you're at the edge of what I think most people would say is a really dumb mistake, but you have to make it because you've painted yourself into a corner.
Any thoughts on Aaron Rodgers blowing his Achilles tendon on the third play of
blowing his what? Achilles tendon. Okay. There's a lot of separate the art from the artist when it comes to sports.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I can't do it with sports. I can't do it.
It's hard. Well, there's some people I can't do it with. Yeah. I'm not a football fan, so I don't have any real attachment to it, but I understand,
He's a noted anti-vaxxer, Aaron Rodgers, and this week he hurt himself in case, I never talk sports here for a good reason, but probably everybody knows who Aaron Rodgers is, really.
Everybody knows, trust me. More people,
a lot of great jokes right during the injury that he was in the
there were a lot of them within the first 10 minutes. That's the problem, is that if you were on Twitter anytime within 12 hours afterwards, you've seen all the good jokes.
It's just everybody went to the same ivermectin joke, and it was really great. They're all good. And why don't we end there? Because I know you've got some thoughts. You were just doing a show. Well, maybe I can't talk about it, but a television show where you were asked to comment on a whole bunch of different figures, including Joe Rogan. And my thing this week, really thought about, I forget which why. I saw some clip of Tim Dillon, the well-known comedian, a very successful podcast, I think. He's like this conspiracy guy, and everybody seems to like him for whatever reason. I don't actually know him, but I saw him palling around. He is pals with Alex Jones. And with all the conspiracy theories about 9/11 and then them being conflated into the anti-vaxxers and, of course, the the Sandy Hook Truthers, which Alex Jones is one of the architects of, I have a moral line. I mean, I would never be friends with someone, and that's why I could never appear on a show like that. Like, I just could not be near. You're out there hanging out with a guy who did the worst thing, which is deny that children lost their lives and created and did terrorize these families to this day. For the rest of their lives, there will be Alex Jones listeners terrorizing these families, and yet you can somehow separate that. I mean, I don't know how many degrees.
They all off,
anyway, and Joe Rogan is friends with him, and that's what I was trying to get to. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, but people in general, they have this idea of like, oh, he's not really like that. It's a character he's playing. Like, he ramps up for the microphone.
Who cares?
And
even worse.
I know. It doesn't matter.
It's even worse.
It's like, hey, he's not really a bank robber. I mean, yeah, he robbed a bank, but it's like, it was kind of a bit he was doing.
You don't have any money in that bank.
Yeah, it doesn't really. He's not like a bank robber. He's just a guy, Again, you know how it is with comics, though. It's like there is an unspoken demilitarized zone that exists in the green room of a comedy club where you understand that you are friends within the confines of that green room, or
well
at least
said,
friendly.
Yeah, I get it.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure,
like, like that there's sort of, or that if you have bullshit, take it somewhere else. So that's not the place for it. And it's totally not. And I think a lot of comics have now expanded that to just life in general, that you're not allowed to not be cool with another comedian. Do you know what I mean? Like the world is a green room,
but I'm not, I'm not out that much, but it's a very well framed, articulated explanation of how. And I think that probably is true to a certain extent with a lot of different people in different industries where you go through a similar experience and there's a solidarity created, therefore, and you're trying to keep the peace, therefore. But with this, I love that idea. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. You can't always stand up to everybody all the time. As I've gotten older, I'm more like stand up like sometimes, not always, but sometimes, but definitely always against anybody who's hanging out with Alex Jones or anybody connected to denying children dying. Nope, that's the guy you got to say something to. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if I would now. Like, I'm sure I haven't seen Tim in probably 4 years. And even then it was like briefly at the stand, but, I don't know that I would say anything. I think it depends. It depends. Cause if I saw him, it would probably be in a green room where it would not be appropriate to do so. But yeah, I mean, and I'm sure that he would love me to call him out on his shit because he knows that most comedians would take his side instinctively in the same way that they don't, because he's got more to offer them than I do.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that's always the case. The leverage in every relationship. Yeah. Yeah. So getting back to Joe Rogan, what are your thoughts on what he has become, what he means, what he represents in our culture today?
Well, that's a very large question for the end of our interview. But I think that Joe Rogan is the right man for the right time, or that it all kind of came together, that he clearly, like, at a certain point said, I want to do my own thing and I'm talking, these are the positive things about it. I'm trying to frame this first by the nice things. Is that he's clearly a dude who said, I want to start my own thing and not be beholden to going on auditions and stuff like that.
Sure.
And that happened to dovetail very perfectly with the explosion of the streaming culture, of watching a podcast in the same way that Marin doing WTF very nicely dovetailed with the rise of podcasting, maybe 10 years ago or whatever. Yep. And then Rogan dovetailed with sort of the rise of like YouTube shows. Mm-hmm. And then the pandemic happened when all of a sudden people are just watching, at home all day. And he really made the most of that. And he clearly works his ass off and all those things. And I think that comedians are way more able to, they're more positioned to make that transition to going DIY than other artists, because it's such a mercenary profession to begin with. Like, you're alone a lot and you're always sort of an independent contractor. But, along with the rise of sort of the streamed, YouTube shows and whatnot, it's also the rise of sort of idiot scholars,
Yeah.
Guys who is like, maybe I'm the smart one. You know what I mean? You know, people who've read 3 books. And they're very proud of the fact that they've read those 3 books.
Along those lines, quick insertion, perfect example, this guy, Dave Smith, irks the shit out of me. I'm trying to get him on the show. I'd love to have a respectful conversation, but yesterday he tweeted something out, and he's like, I've been digging into several of these papers. I'm like, it caused me to tweet out, like, people study in college to become research scientists, to learn how to do research. I'm a comic. Yeah. You're a comic. Don't dig into any research. I don't need you to dig into the papers. Like, you don't even know how to read an abstract.
And how much digging? What you did is you read someone else who dug into it. Maybe. And you absorbed those thoughts. Maybe, at the most. Yeah, it's you know, there is such a thing as expertise, which is very out of fashion now. Like, the much more in fashion is the idea of, like, maybe I'm the expert. Maybe the experts are dumb and I'm the expert.
Yes. So much easier to be one now, because you can just find whatever answers and information you want on anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously he takes advantage of that, you know, and there's always a kernel of truth to the complaints of conspiracy, or the things that conspiracy theorists talk about. Yeah. I mean, you look at the JFK murder, there's clearly weird shit going on. There's clearly stuff that we're not being told. It doesn't mean that what we're not being told is this crazy conspiracy theory. Yeah. It could just be as simple as just people sweeping shit under the rug or whatever, embarrassing to certain people because they dropped the ball. You know, the thing is about every cult leader, and I don't think that Joe Rogan is trying to be a cult leader. I think a lot of the people that love Joe Rogan want him to be a cult leader and treat him like he is one. I think he's just a typical sort of a narcissistic comedian, which is like one step below a cult leader. Do you know what I mean? There's no messianic goal at the end of it. He just likes the attention of being, I get to be the guy who talks.
Any comedian would.
I have not shut up this entire last 45 minutes, so I do not absolve myself. But the thing that cult leaders do well, they're really good at diagnosis. They're just bad at prescription. They point out the things that are wrong with the world. It's like, we all walk around every day and we feel that there's something wrong with the world as it currently stands, that there's a few people who are making a lot of money exploiting the rest of us, and these systems are designed to keep certain people down, and some people can break the law and nothing happens. You know, we all feel that. And I think conspiracy dudes are really good at playing on that feeling that we all have. But then their prescription or their explanation is where things go off the rails.
Yes, and it so often does. So well said. And I was just listening to Naomi Klein, who I'm hoping to get on the show.
Oh, I got to read that book. I'm looking forward to it.
But she says there needs to be new language, or she uses language she doesn't use, as we have been, conspiracy theorists. She calls them conspiracy influencers. And you just basically explain, you said conspiracy dudes at one point, you said, and you explain what that means, because they don't have a theory. Because so often there are 2 conspiracy theories about, say, COVID or vaccines that are completely contradictory to each other. They're not theories. They fall apart. There's so many different ideas. You can't follow them. You know, 9/11, they blew up the building. It's like they last very long, very short under quick scrutiny. And so they're not really theories. They're conspiracy influencers, she says, is the language.
Yeah, that's a perfect term.
Yeah. Well said. Really well said. I'm glad we did that final question. Thank you. Now you can go. Now you're dismissed, Christian Finnegan. Thank you.
Thank you. Whew.
When the tyrants taunt you and the sirens teach, you better stand up. Stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge. Let the weak flee. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up.